Hi there guys, I am super excited to present this one to you today. And this module we are going to talk about skill hacking. This is one of my favourite subjects. This is something that I've spent years doing. Why? Because we were on the beach and we were trying to work out how we can teach people in what is probably, to be fair, one of the hardest locations to learn in, Tarifa, which we make no apologies for, because as we always say, once you can ride here, you can ride anywhere, so you learn once. But, you know, we had this situation where we had these really tough conditions to learn in, and we had to get people learning as fast as possible. And I remember when we first started teaching, you know, from starting on day one to actually riding, was probably in the region of a week to 10 days. Now we just had someone through the other day and we did it in 6 hours. And that's due to this, that we've taken every single aspect of every single part of the course and we've hacked it. We've taken it and we've cut it down and we said, how can we get this person learning faster? And we've applied it across literally thousands of people and we've come up with the results. So what I want to do is give you the benefit, and this isn't just me, you know, this is coming from a huge amount of sources. I've basically taken this from all the different people out, so I'm not taking credit for this, but what I want to do is give you the experience, the knowledge of our experience in a really compact form. Why? So you, when you're on the water, when you're analysing your tricks, when we're talking about the video feedback, you can start to see A, how I'm breaking it down, but B, how you can break it down. Because the idea of it, obviously, any good coach is trying to make himself obsolete. And that's exactly what I want to do. I want to make it so that in 4 weeks, 6 months, whatever, you don't need me anymore. You can go out there and you can do this yourself because you know exactly what I'm looking at when you're looking at what you're doing. So, that said, we're going to start with some very simple principles, and then what we'll do is I'll try and show you how we've applied them so that you can go away and then apply them to any different skill, any different trick, any different thing you're trying to learn in kitesurfing, and in everything else as well. I mean, obviously we're going to focus on kitesurfing, but this applies across everything. So the first principle that you need to understand, and I'd be surprised if somebody hadn't heard of this before, a chap called Pareto, an 18th century economist, basically noticed that in any given society, 80% of the wealth was concentrated in 20% of the population. And it was often a lot more skewed. It was often more like 99% of the wealth was concentrated in 1% of the population. Okay. Now that was a really interesting kind of observation at the time, and it was kind of forgotten about for hundreds of years afterwards. And then it's kind of resurfaced in the last few years. Why? Because people have realised, look, this doesn't just apply to wealth. This applies to everything. 80% or 20% of the input is always responsible for 80% of the output. And often it's even more skewed. Often it's much more like 4% is responsible for 96%. And I'll give you some examples. Think about when you're walking around your house. You walk on 20% of the carpet 80% of the time. So if I'm going to clean the floor, you know, if my mum or my girlfriend is coming home, she's saying, you've got to clean it, you know, I want the house clean when I come home. Aha, I can do that. Because what do? I just clean the part where I've been walking all the time, clean the 20%. And in a fifth of the time, I've done the work. She comes home happy. I'm happy because I've done no work. And the house is clean. It's 80% clean. Another example, you wear 20% of your wardrobe 80% of the time. I guarantee you'll see in these videos I'm wearing the same t-shirt most of the time. It's because we all have our favourite clothes and we wear them all the time. Hollywood, 4% of the movies are responsible for 96% of the total money made. Okay? The other 96% scrabble around for 4% of the total earnings. Okay? Think about if you've got a business. This is a really interesting one if you've got a business, because 20% of your marketing is responsible for 80% of your clients. And again, it's often more skewed. It's often more like 1% to 99%. So what we've got to find, the first thing we've got to find in any skill is that 20%. So let's give you an example of that. Language. In the English language, 100 words make up 50% of the written language. So if you're going to learn English, where do you start? Do you start on the 49,900 and however many words that make up the most of the language? Or do you learn the 100 that are going to give you 50%? It's obvious, it's a no-brainer. Because then if you take those 100 words and you combine them, let's say, with the 10 most used verbs and their conjugations, you're practically fluent. And how long do you think it takes to learn 100 words and 10 verbs? Very little time at all. In literally a matter of weeks, you can be pretty much fluent in that language. Now, what you've got to understand here, there's a big difference between that level of fluency and kind of the level of fluency that you're going to get when you're an absolute expert in language, of course. But what I'm saying is that to become good at something, good, i.e. good to being one of the top best 10% at that skill in the world, is fairly easy. To become a master is very difficult. Again, let's just compare that. We've talked about learning 110 words in the English language to learning all the words in the English. Well, I'm English and I don't know all the words in the English language. I don't even know how many there are, but I imagine there's a hell of a lot. So that difference there is huge. It's like if you're a jogger, there's a very big difference between the 95th percent person who's good at jogging and an Olympic athlete who jogs. That last 5% is years and years and years and years of work. And as you move further, you get 96, each percent gets longer. So, if you go from 95% to the 96% might take a year. To go from 95th to 96th to 97th might take 2. 97th to 98th might take 4. So I'm not talking about being the absolute top percentile. I'm not talking about being an Olympic athlete in whatever we're talking about. I'm talking about having a skill that's useful and that's better than most people have. Okay, so that's really, really important distinction to make here when we talk about this idea of language and the use of skill in this way. I'm not saying that by learning 100 words and by learning 10 verbs you're going to be the best English speaker in the world. No, but you are going to be better than 95% of the world. Okay, 95% of the people who tried to learn English at some point, because you can probably at least have a conversation. And I know from my French classes, if I try and speak French, I spent 5 years studying French and I can't really have a conversation in French. Okay, because I didn't learn those simple things that were easy to hold on to. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here. All right, so I want to make that very clear. So the first thing you need to look at is the 20%. So again, in kitesurfing, what we do here, in any skill, we look at what's the 20%. Where can I get the most output with the minimum input? How can I break this skill down to get that 20%? So how do we do that? How do we find that 20%? Well, the first thing we've got to do is deconstruct the skill. Break it down into its smallest possible but workable chunks. Okay, now I'm going to use an example from kitesurfing here, something that hopefully pretty much all of you are familiar with, the water start. Okay, and this is something that again we've broken down, but again it's something that you hopefully, you're either working on it now, or you're about to work on it, or you've cracked it and you can really understand this skill. Okay, this is why I'm going to choose water starting as a skill. But most of the time when this is taught, what we see, the instructor sits on the beach, goes through the whole skill, once up, this is how you do it, and he's off, maybe shows you on the water as well, gives you the board, right, off you go, your turn. Okay, and you're expected from that point to have mastered the whole skill, from literally getting the board, going out there, putting the board on your feet, put the kite in the air, fly it down, move your legs, and off you go. Yeah. What I would suggest is that skill can be broken down into a huge amount of chunks. First of all, we've got getting the board on your feet. That's a chunk. Secondly, we've got having the kite above your head, working it slightly from side to side whilst keeping your back to wind. Understanding just how you keep your back to wind, how you can use the kite to keep your back to wind, how you can use paddling to keep your back to wind. That's a vital part, because if you're trying to walk start from here, we all know it's not going to work, okay? So that's your second chunk. Third chunk, okay, gradually increasing the power so that you're not being flung over the front, but you're starting to, how we lovingly call, teabag. So you're just just coming out of the water, just bouncing out of the water, again keeping your back to wind, keeping that power constant. Then from there, we might talk you through the actual power stroke. So this is how you do the power stroke. Start up here, bring it down. That's what you're looking for in your first stroke. Then once you're doing that, we might talk about the board. Okay, well now, as you're flying the power stroke, as you're coming out of the water, move the board. Okay, so you can see how we can break what could be seen as one huge skill, like a mega circuit, into many meta circuits. And this is the idea with any skill. So when you're doing a trick, what I want you to try and do is don't think of the trick in its entirety. Try and think of all the separate little distinct parts of that trick that you're doing. And try and separate them as well between kite and board. Because they're actually separate action. And what you're doing with the kite isn't actually related to the board in a lot of tricks. It's just simply, this is going on with the kite, this is going on with the board. Maybe at the same time, but they're distinct actions, okay? So that's breaking the skill down, deconstructing the skill is super important, because then we can start to focus on the 20% of the skill. But also, we can start to look at which of these parts are most important. And more importantly, which of these parts can be taken out and practiced somewhere else. Now, this is crucial. Because again, taking the example of the water start, okay, if we take any one of those blocks on their own, we can say, well, look, actually, this bit can be practiced somewhere else. So getting the board on your feet. Well, first of all, do you need to have a kite in the air to practice that? No. Do you need to be in the water to practice that? No. So there's two breakdowns there. Okay, you could practice on the beach, getting the board on your feet. You could go in the water without a kite, getting the board on your feet. You could fly a kite on the beach, getting a board on your feet. So you've got exercises, drills you can do there before you even get in the water. You can do that in your front room, try and get the board on your feet. And actually for some people it's a really good exercise because they really struggle with the flexibility. So just getting the muscle memory really helps. The motion of coming out of the water, using the board and moving the board in the right direction, does that have to be practiced with a kite? What about wakeboarding? Wakeboarding's a perfect, deep water starting behind a wakeboard is a perfect example of that. Or underpowering yourself and practicing the same thing on the beach. Board on your feet, cool, I'm going to practice the power stroke, practice getting up on the beach. Word of warning, if you are going to practice that, make sure you're underpowered because you can go flying over the front at that point, or make sure it's a nice constant wind day. Don't do it in gusty winds, please. And if you do, certainly don't tell people I told you to do it, okay? But you see what I mean? We can take these parts out and we can block them down. Again, getting the board on your feet, something people really struggle with. But what's another block that we can look at there? Well, flying the kite one-handed. Because you've got to have the kite in one hand to get the board on your feet. You can practice that on the beach with a rock. We have people walking along the beach, literally one hand, picking up a rock, throwing it away, walking back, picking up a rock. And what are they doing? Well, they're practicing that one-handed flying for when they go into the water. So you see, once we've deconstructed the skill, we can look at, okay, well we can practice the skill in shorter parts, so we're not focusing too far ahead into the future. But what we're also doing is we're saying, well, look, we can now break the skill into things that we can practice other places. If you go in later on, handle passing, wakeboarding, perfect. Trampolines, you can do handle passes on a trampoline. Things like this all have massive value. So look for deconstructing the skill. Then look, okay, well, what other opportunities do I have where I'm taking away as many variables as possible so I can focus just on that one part of the skill? And this is the big problem in kitesurfing, is that we have so many variables. You've got the wind, you've got the kite, you've got the board, you've got the waves. So any of them we can remove at any point makes our life easier. So we've looked at the 20%. We're then looking at deconstructing the skill, and then how we can break those chunks down, or how we can remove those chunks from as many of the variables as possible. How we can isolate those chunks in by themselves, okay? So hopefully you're starting to see how valuable this is. The other thing I want to talk about here is the reason that we want to break it down into chunks is because what you want is to make sure that the goal isn't too far in the future. Why? Because to get into this state that we're going to talk about in the next module, this state of flow, this state of being in the zone, you have to be present in the now. Now, this sounds a bit woo-woo to start with until I explain it, then it makes perfect sense. If you're trying to get the board on your feet and all your brain is thinking about is, I want to ride, you are not focused on where you are now. Just like if you were going to I don't know, do something stupidly dangerous, like, you know, go base jumping, for example, or the guy who jumped across the Great Wall of China. If he was on the top of that slope, worrying about what his girlfriend had said to him that morning, or what he was going to have for tea that night, he's as good as dead. He needs to be right there in the moment. And that's vital for what we're doing in kiting as well, is that you need to be present at that point. And again, we'll go into this in huge depth in the next module. But just for now, what I want you to know is that breaking it down into chunks means the goal is very, very close. You need to get the ball on my feet. Cool, done. Okay, next. And this is hugely important that we keep that feedback cycle and the goal cycle short. So that rather than trying to project too far into the future, we stay right here. Okay, this is what I'm focusing on now. Okay, so that's the end of the first video. We've got more on this coming up, so check out the video 2. I'll speak to you in just a second, guys.